Valentine's cards are great, but the love language on the beat is Ohio State football. And we have plenty of messages from our, very kind readers, watchers, listeners who want to talk just about those Buckeyes on this, a Freaky Friday edition presented by the Waterworks. He's Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. It's the Austin and Birm Show. And a happy Valentine's to you, my friend.
Yes, it's been quite a romantic day already. The weekend is off to a wonderful romantic start for everyone. And it couldn't be better than starting it with love letters from viewers. So thank you.
Well, I didn't say they were love letters. They're just
I know, but
our love language.
To me, it is a love letter because it's like, hey, none of them said, hey, we hate you. Oh. And so
I just deleted all those.
Oh, okay. Well, I have a fairly low bar what I accept as love. Growing up as the ninth of 11 children, it was pretty difficult to feel a lot of affection in our home. So as long as people didn't say I hate you, well, then I took that as like, hey, they must like me.
Well, here we go. We're no longer just getting into the vibes of Ohio State football. We're diving deep into Birm's psyche as we get to the end of this week. Clearly, we need another press conference. We need to meet the transfer portal additions. We need to talk to the early enrollees. That did not happen this week either. We got a question about that last week in the mailbag. Thought we'd get that in the middle of this week. Here's hoping and praying and crossing fingers that happens next week, because we are at this point now less than a month away from the start of spring football and creeping ever closer to the start of the 2026 football season for the Buckeyes. So Mike wants us to know right now, it is a Friday. It's fitting that there are some bold P's, which is exactly what he's got right here. Predict next season's Ohio State Defensive Player of the Year and Offensive Player of the Year. We were not allowed to take Julian Sayin. Did not say anything about Jeremiah Smith, which seems like a cheat code. And Newcomer of the Year, someone who didn't start this year. That could be a little bit more of a crapshoot, Birm.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised by Mike's exclusion of Jeremiah Smith from this conversation. I'm not surprised by the inclusion of Julian Sayin, but to not remove both of them from our list of options seems folly. So, Mike, I'm taking Jeremiah Smith, who's the best player in college football, to be Ohio State's best offensive player. So we're going to start off this episode with a little bit of a gimme. So now that I've taken him, who do you take? Because you can't take the same guy.
What? That's not how. It's not a draft.
We're making the rules up as we go because it's Valentine's Day weekend, and that's how it goes.
I would say we're both taking Jeremiah, and we should exclude Julian and JJ from this conversation and take somebody else.
Okay. I think for Ohio State's best case scenario, it darn well better be Bo Jackson, right?
Okay.
Like, I think it has to be. Now, I think there's an argument potentially to be made about a second receiver, somebody who emerges as the Carnell Tate to Jeremiah, or Jeremiah to Emeka, or Emeka to Marvin, or Marvin to Jackson, or Jackson to Chris, or Chris to Garrett, however you want to say it.
The crazy thing is you're still not even done.
Yeah. I think there's an argument to be made there, but like if you want to view next season as a successful season for Ohio State, and to me that means making the playoff and winning a game in the playoff, which I don't think that happens without like a 1,200 plus rushing yard season from Bo Jackson. So give me the Lambo. Just take the Lambo out for a spin.
Okay. Yeah. And that's also a smart way to approach an award, because there are statistics that would back that up. That's tougher to do with an offensive lineman. And I think that Austin Serveld is probably the single most important piece of this offseason puzzle for Ohio State. If what we're talking about throughout, which we had 2 episodes about the offensive line on the beat this week, presented by the Waterworks, so we don't need to belabor that point. But if he does wind up sticking at left tackle, or even if he moves to right tackle, the pass protection piece, the way that fits together with the enhanced or tweaked run game is going to require these offensive linemen to all take a step forward. We know that Austin Serveld will not get shortchanged on the work ethic piece. Neither will Luke Montgomery, Carson Hensman. All these guys have proven that many times over with Dudes of the Week and Iron Buckeye Awards and all that stuff in the body of work that they have. extensive as it is with the number of games that they've played for Ohio State. But, it does get tougher. Maybe if Bo Jackson has 1,200 yards, it'd be easy to then turn around and say, yeah, this was done because of those guys up front. Or you look at the sack total or the way that Ohio State plays once they get back to a college football playoff, which I expect that they will. Maybe that'll be the true barometer of that step forward, although playing the schedule that they will probably know well before then. So I think that's sort of the tipping point. This offensive line has to be slightly better than it was a year ago. Again, I don't think it was bad. I don't think it's been I think it's been a little bit unfairly maligned just based on two halves of football. We don't need to belabor that point either. But I'll say Austin Sarabell just to give us a little bit more variety, because I do think it's you have to start with JJ. He's the best player in the sport.
Yeah, I mean, Austin is a guy that we talked about last year as a potential team MVP, not just an offensive player of the year, which obviously signifies some statistical output, or in the case of an offensive lineman, like the ability to say, hey, I didn't give up any sacks or whatever. I think that defense is a much harder thing to predict here, considering you're looking at probably 8 new starters. And I think in this defense, like if it's not going to be one of the linebackers, then I think that there's a struggle coming, because when you're replacing 2 likely top 15 picks in the NFL draft, like someone has to be able, I'm not saying that someone has to be Sonny Styles or Arvell Reese for Ohio State to have a successful season. I'm saying that we cannot look at this linebacker situation and see a 2018 return, because you think back to that 2018, that was Pete Warner and Tuff Borland and Brendan White having to move down to play linebacker to help out later in the season. That was after losing Jerome Baker, after losing Raekwon McMillan, the things started to get real difficult to replace NFL players at the position. And you'd hope that James Laurinaitis' recruitment of Riley Pettijohn, TJ Alford, Christian Allegro, those guys coming in would change things a little bit to make the transition a little bit easier. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the defensive player of the year for Ohio State on defense is going to be Peyton Pierce. And I think it's because it has to be. If Ohio State's defense is going to even be anywhere near where it's been the last couple of years, it has to have a guy in the middle that you can count on, that's reliable, play in, play out, is going to be able to play all 3 downs on defense. And so to me, that's Peyton Pierce. And I know that there's going to be a lot more hype and conversation around Riley Pettijohn or TJ Alford, et cetera. But I don't care how good Kenyatta Jackson is in 2026, or Zion Grady or John Walker or anybody else who plays up front. If there's nobody in the middle of the defense to help make it easier for Earl Little and Terry Moore, because Caleb Downs isn't behind the linebackers anymore either, I think the Buckeyes defense has to be run in the way that Matt Patricia and James Laurinaitis are viewing it, which is linebacker first, as opposed to safety first. So I'm going with Peyton Pierce, the Texas Tornado.
I guess I'm not surprised that you took the Texas Tornado and the opportunity just to use the nickname again. But I really thought,
well, it's Valentine's Day weekend, and I love that nickname.
I really thought you were going to take Jalen McLean, though.
That's the easy choice, I think. I think that's the most. I think if we did a poll of 100 people and said who's going to be Ohio State's defensive MVP, Jalen McLean would probably earn 65 to 70% of the vote.
You know what we should do? We should play Family Feud with the people who watch the beat, and then we have to go answer top 100 answers on the board. Ohio State Defensive Player of the Year.
We can certainly set that up for next Friday, and I think it's actually a brilliant idea. So,
I don't know. Do you think we can do it within 1 week? That sounds.
No, we need what? We need 5 categories, right? And we need polls on YouTube or on our Twitter accounts or whatever, and it's easy.
Well, then we'll know the answers.
Yeah, but we will know the answers. The people out there won't.
We can't play Family Feud if we know the answers.
Okay, you don't know the answers, but I'll know the answers. Or
then we're not playing the feud. We need Allie or Liberty to protect the answers, and then
what if we bring in just a third person? I'll play Steve Harvey next Friday, and it's you versus Zach Boren on the Buckeyes feud. And only I know the answers.
I think television's Adam King should be Steve Harvey. And you and I have to play.
But that would require counting on Adam to collate and collect the information. And I don't believe that I can count on him for such things. The guy doesn't wake up till 11:30 a.m. every day.
Okay, we got way off track here. We're still on the first question.
Is your answer Jalen McClain, or is it are you
who do I
seeing the trend and knowing that it must be John Walker because that's how the Buckeyes are going to be the most successful version of themselves?
I agree with you that I think it needs to be Peyton Pierce as the defensive MVP. I think the best statistical output is going to come from Kenyatta Jackson. And I think that Jalen McClain is probably heading towards a season that is not unlike what Caleb Downs did, where his impact doesn't show up statistically, but every game, and he did this even a year ago, he makes 2 or 3 plays that even if it's just a tackle 20 yards downfield instead of a touchdown is hugely significant for Ohio State in the grand scheme of things. So
I don't mean to interrupt you, but if we just go back to November 30th or November 29th against Michigan, he had 2 of them in the first quarter that basically eliminated touchdowns for Michigan, and that entire game changes like 100% if Jalen McClain doesn't run down Jordan Marshall on 2 different plays.
Yeah, without a doubt. And so I think Jalen McClain, his value to putting everything together, which normally that becomes a conversation. I don't disagree with you with Matt Patricia and James Laurinaitis that, as Sonny Styles proved a year ago, that doesn't have to come from a safety. It is no longer identified as a safety-driven defense. But I think the guy who allows everything to fit together, not just for the secondary, but for all 11, is going to be Jalen McClain. You've been driving that bus for a while, so if you're going to even slightly let up on the wheel, I'm going to take it. And
yeah, I'm not letting up on the Jalen McClain wheel. I want to be like sure about what I'm saying. I think for similar to what I said for the offense, if the Buckeyes are going to do and have a successful season, which I think again is making the playoffs and winning a game, if somebody in the middle doesn't emerge and be that guy and is someone that you can count on, snap in, snap out, then I think they're in trouble defensively. And when you look at all the other pieces that are coming in new and guys who have to get put into the system and learn the system, the only guys that I think can really be in this conversation as potential defensive player of the year would be Kenyatta Jackson, Peyton Pierce, or Jalen McClain. I don't like those 3 dudes all have to have huge years for Ohio State to be what that defense is expected to be, I think, because the other 8 players are all just learning on the fly. And I know that Matt Patricia is a great coach and James Laurinaitis is and Matt Carreri is, and they're going to get those guys up to speed. But like, you better get the best out of the guys that have been in the program. And that's going to be those 3.
Well, then, as you mentioned, a lot of guys who haven't been in the program or started for the program, which was the last part of Mike's question, the newcomer of the year. And I think it's Terry Moore, and also needs to be Terry Moore for a lot of the reasons that we just described about the secondary.
Yeah, I'm going to go offense, and I'm going to say Kyle Parker. I just feel like he's a guy that Ohio State is going to end up counting on this season, and the relationship he's had with Cortez Hankton will get him on the field earlier because he'll understand Cortez Hankton's style and his way of communicating. And I think that will translate in a big way once he starts realizing that he's getting thrown the football from Julian Sayin.
All right. Thank you, Mike. That wound up being a lengthy journey, a long walk.
Yeah. And Adam King, wake up earlier, man. I mean, I'm not like a 6 a.m. guy myself. Don't get me wrong. I'm an 8:15 every day type of person, but
you did used to have a lot of Adam King to you.
I know. I loved those days of being able to sleep in, but that's just not the way the world works anymore. Grow up, Peter Pan, Count Chocula.
Willy Wonka, in fact. That's how Lib knows him. Charlie
kind of looks like Willy Wonka.
Which version? Doesn't matter. We're getting way off track. We need football back. Michael would like to know, he said, well, I'm extremely hopeful that Ohio State retains Matt Patricia. There is still that lingering risk that he gets poached by the NFL. If that happens, where do you think Ryan Day goes with the defensive coordinator position? Does he promote Tim Walton and Matt Carreri to co-coordinate or bring in another NFL type? I think I think the risk is vanishing of losing Matt Patricia in this offseason cycle, Berm.
I agree. I mean, it's February the 13th. It's Valentine's Day weekend. If Matt Patricia does love Ohio State, and I think he does, I think this is the perfect weekend for him to write a love letter to Buckeye Nation and say, hey, I'm still your guy. Will you still have me? And they'll say, yes, Matt, we will. And then everything will be fine.
I don't care if he writes a letter. I think he should write his name on a contract.
With a giant pencil?
Yes.
Or they should just make the contract a pencil.
Another great piece of content that we just came up with on the fly. Ohio State, you can use this one because we're obviously not going to be involved in the boardroom where these deals are signed. But they should hand him one of those enormous pencils that they were using in the pregame all year round.
Exactly. Put the contract on the pencil.
Whatever. I don't care. Just get it signed.
Can you get a pencil notarized? Here's the deal. I think that the answer is contingent on when the hypothetical risk or departure would occur, because I don't know, as you head into next season with all of the changes that are happening on defense with the schedule as it is, the timing of it. Ohio State certainly is a big enough brand to go out and find another NFL guy. Are they going to find another former NFL head coach, another Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator available at this point? I doubt it. I think that there would be a real possibility that we would, again, in this very hypothetical situation, which we both think is shrinking, I think it's much more likely that last season's discussed path of Matt Guerrieri and Tim Walton becoming co-defensive coordinators would occur in this case. But I don't think it's going to happen either way. And I think that would give Ryan Day, this is going to sound crazy, but it's sort of a opportunity to save your own reputation if the season went bad, because you're like, well, I tried the first time coordinator, didn't work, and we moved on. I think that there's
but he's done that already. So
I know, but that's the timing of this is what would make it feel like a little bit different. And I know that the argument will be this is when Bill O'Brien was hired, this is when Chip Kelly was hired, et cetera. This is when Carlos Lockman was hired in March. I don't think Ohio State would have any problem finding a very high level defensive coordinator from around college football. But I also think that Ryan Day's preference at this juncture seems pretty clear, that he wants NFL people running his offense and defense. So we'll see. But again, I don't think I'm hopeful that Michael reads this question or hears this on the podcast on Friday morning, and then by the end of the weekend, he's like, you know what? Well, I'm so glad I don't have to worry about that.
I think we can all agree with that. I just the same way that Keenan Bailey and Billy Fessler were in the selection set for Ohio State this offseason, or Matt Guerrieri and Tim Walton were a year ago for the defensive coordinator job. Like, that would still be the same case here. But I think the way that this is trending, and maybe there will, whether that's this offseason or next offseason, there will be a point where Ryan Day, if he wants to keep Walt and Matt Guerrieri on staff, he has to give them that opportunity here, or he risks losing them, which is basically what happened with Brian Hartline last year. When you look back at it and that promotion, did it work? Not work? We'll probably debate that forever in the shades of gray with that successful evaluation. Like, I don't think it's this offseason. If they have to make a move in the middle of February by losing Matt Patricia, I think he would continue to take that big swing just like he did a year ago in landing Matt Patricia, or 2 years ago with Chip Kelly and Bill O'Brien. I think that's clearly the model that he wants. And I don't think, given the investment in this roster and the size of this coaching staff, the way that the arms race has been moving for Ohio State this offseason, I don't think he could afford to take that path of least resistance. And this will also sound like maybe unfair, probably would be. He wouldn't just risk losing Tim Walton or Matt Guerrieri in February of this year, because there aren't that many places that they could go. So, that part would suck for them, but I think they'd understand it, because I think a lot of the contract deals have already been in place and they're incredibly well compensated for the roles that they have. And maybe that is enough solace for them to to weather that storm for one more year, or have some patience until they get a chance to be out and out play calling defensive coordinators. But, they've both had opportunities like that in the past. I think they also can recognize that they are in a pretty comfortable, good spot right now.
Yeah, they've got a good staff. The continuity has been great. You can certainly see the argument for moving in that direction, but I just think, Ohio State is Ohio State, and Ryan Day has learned some lessons over the last few years, and I think he would still prefer to go get somebody from the outside that is going to provide a different voice, because I think he's seeing the value in that. And that's clearly why the answer is Nick Saban. He's BFF now. Like he's best friends with Nick Saban, right? Like, wouldn't Nick Saban just be the interim DC for a year, come in and tinker around?
No, I don't think he would.
You don't think he could bring Rob Gronkowski with him, and they could? Wait, that's a different network.
That's not the same thing. You're Pat McAfee. I guess he could be the special teams coordinator.
Oh, that'd be fun. Shirtless STC.
Probably don't want Desmond Howard. Aaron brought up an interesting point, one that I hadn't really considered. Are you guys at all concerned about wide receiver height next year? Ohio State has Jeremiah Smith back, Chris Henry as well, but he's a true freshman. Then the Buckeyes have Brandon Ennis, Devin McEwen, and Kyle Parker, all under or right at 6 feet tall. Hoping Phillip Bell continues to develop and see the field. If guys can create separation, awesome. But against better teams with bigger corners, that could be interesting. I had not given much thought to that, Birm.
I hadn't either, and it's because most teams aren't going to have 3 6'4" corners. So I don't think that you worry that much about the matchup game that far down the depth chart. And also, you have Jeremiah Smith and Chris Henry, if a team like Oregon, for example, with longer corners is out there, then they still have to defend the slot. They still have to find ways to defend the tight end. They still have to do other stuff. So obviously, Chris Henry's like 17 feet tall. So like
he's quite tall.
So I don't see it as a major issue. The average NFL receiver is 6'1". I don't think it's really that different than the way the Buckeyes are built. I think the bigger concern, if I have more concern about the wide receivers, it's not about their height. It's about their ability to create space, which is the real crux of this issue for Aaron here. They have to find guys that can create space and make plays when they get the ball in their hands. And that's a bigger concern to me than the size. Obviously, you didn't want to lose Quincy Porter, which would have been nice to have another 6'4" guy out there. But, Bodman Miller, 6'4". They lost a couple of those bigger guys this offseason. But Phillip Bell's 6'1". Brandon Ennis is 6 foot. We haven't been able to size up McEwen and Parker yet, so we don't really know exactly what their actual height is versus their listed height. But no, the concern for me is what these guys do with the football when it hits their hands, not their size, because I don't think that's an issue.
Yeah, and I think that it seems like, and as you said, we're a month away from spring ball and getting to see how Devin McEwen moves, operates in an Ohio State practice against Ohio State athletes on a day in, day out basis. Same for Kyle Parker. But when you watch those guys on film at their previous stops, the physical mold seems to be more about creating that separation with speed rather than winning contested catch opportunities down the field. And, whether that's scheming them open or just relying on pure out and out speed and agility, that's really, I think, what drew Ohio State to these players in the transfer portal. I think the opportunity to attack and get back to some more horizontal stuff, maybe more of the mesh concepts that Ryan Day was so famous for when he got to Ohio State. Don't rely on you to be 6'4". In fact, it probably is not the ideal way to run some of those routes. So I think that's where it's going. We'll see for sure, but it's what's, I think, really interesting to think about what Aaron brings up here and compare that to what Arthur Smith's influence is and how this offense evolves, and if it becomes not just stretching the field vertically. I know we've heard Ryan Day say about 1 million times that you want to be able to attack every part of the field. That's both 53 and a third across and however many you have to cover vertically. But I think there's definitely a case to be made that they were only really able to successfully do that in one direction last year. And some of that will also require another step forward in the physicality or physical development of Brandon Ennis, because I think Ohio State thought he was going to be able to do a lot of the things that Emeka could, and it didn't he didn't reach that level last year. Few players do, by the way. That's not necessarily a knock on Brandon Inniss or anybody else, but I think that certainly when you saw Devin McEwen on film, that's immediately where my mind went. That's what he's here to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's football. It's a cat and mouse game. It's give and take. The last couple of years, defenses have attempted to make it harder for Ohio State to get vertical because of Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, et cetera. You've seen a lot more too deep, a lot more, umbrella coverage, a lot softer zones. So you have to be able and willing to change the way you're attacking it. And that means getting back to those mesh concepts, getting back to the drags, getting back to the end arounds and jet sweeps, doing other things like that. So, I mean, we're seeing Ohio State trying to fix what its opponents did to stymie them a year ago. And some of that was just naturally a byproduct of Carnell Tate missing 3 games, and the offense gets a little bit bogged down when Jeremiah is the only guy that can get deep. But now if you have guys that you can actually work in the intermediate passing game and guys who can create space when they get the ball in their hands, Paris Campbell was not a deep threat. He was just the fastest guy on the team. And would get the ball 1 or 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage or 1 or 2 yards in front of the line of scrimmage and then make things happen. That's what you need. You need guys who can do that. So that was clearly the intention when you went out and got Devin McEwen and Kyle Parker, and it's what you're hoping for out of Phillip Bell as the other guy listed here on this question. But the size is not an issue. The Buckeyes receivers are still bigger than average.
Yeah, and you bring up Paris Campbell, and the same thing is true for KJ Hill. And I remember thinking about the physical comparison, because it's like, well, they got an undersized guy in Devin McEwen. Like, at least the way he's listed, and we haven't met him yet, it's like virtually the same as KJ. And there are a lot of different ways to get open and be effective with the football in your hand at wide receiver. See if that shifts this year. This came from Tyler. This is question number 4, Freaky Friday foursome. There's actually 5 questions this week, though. So
I like how you worked in a wrestling reference into this one without actually it being a wrestling question, though. Smart. Nice job, Tyler. Well done. No, that's Tyler playing the game. That's Tyler playing the game. He actually knew what would be your trigger here, and so he just threw in a random wrestler.
There was a wrestling question attached to the bottom, but we don't need to get into that quite as much this week, especially after my embarrassing performance in the Rumble. Most of the discussion this offseason has been about going towards an Indiana model for roster building, but why isn't it a discussion of their model of play on the field? They had exponentially less depth than we did, but they played with a Jacob Fatu. Are you talking about the Samoan werewolf? His mindset of all gas, no brakes? Are you talking about coast to coast and post to post? Yaramin? While Ohio State played at a purposefully slower pace. Do you see this changing in the upcoming season? What a great question, Tyler. I love it.
I don't think Ohio State played purposefully slow.
Yes, they did.
I think that they ran a lot more plays than they wanted to.
Okay, well, he didn't write purposefully. I edited that in because there was a different description for it.
Oh, and now the truth is getting out here. I don't think they played purposefully slow. Like, they just didn't hit home runs like they have done in the previous years. There were how many different drives this year where if Bo Jackson makes a guy miss in the middle of the field, he takes it 60 yards for a touchdown. Instead, it's an 8-yard run. And so, like, when you have to then combine 6 8-yard runs to get you down into the red zone instead of 1 50-yard run, it looks like you're playing slower because you're having to do more. You have to put more plays on tape. But obviously, the Buckeyes are not concerned about running down the game clock and hurry up and all that. And I wish they would. I don't think Indiana was playing at a frenetic pace this season. I know that they were just extremely efficient. And part of that is having a really good quarterback. Part of that is having an aggressive mindset with the passing game, which they certainly did. But they picked their spots. They also had 3 really good running backs who ran the ball very, very hard and were. I don't think that Ohio State's pace of play was the problem. I know that there's been a ton of discussion about it. We've talked about it on this show, the last week's Friday mailbag as well. Like, I don't think the pace of play was the issue. I think the inability to have home run hitters getting at bats with the opportunity to hit a home run was the problem. Because as Ryan Day has said multiple times, every play is designed to score a touchdown. Like, that's that's the way it's meant, right? Like,
I think it can
except
be
for the QB kneel.
I think it can be both, though, Berm. I mean, aside from letting the play clock go down to 1 and huddling every single time, if Ohio State goes tempo more against teams that, whether it's Miami or Purdue, if you do give yourself more at bats at a home run and you wear down opposing defenses, I feel like you have a better chance of connecting. Like you're facing a pitcher now who's throwing, his 100th fastball of the day, might slow down just a little bit for you. And maybe the analogy doesn't work perfectly, but I think that's what we expected Ohio State to do in the Cotton Bowl. And that
Certainly.
it didn't happen. And if they had,
until it did, and then it worked, and then they didn't do it again in the second half, and no one knows why.
But if Akeem Mesidor and Ruben Bain had to play 10 or 15 more snaps, or anyone in that secondary, like, could Bo Jackson have had a better chance of making those guys miss? Is that solely on Bo Jackson? I think he has to get better. I've said that before, and he will going into year 2. Could he have been put in better positions against a more worn down defense, or a defense that gets out of sorts because you're not huddling and letting them regroup between every play? I think that there's elements of all things that can be true. So I don't think that, I think Ohio State doesn't have to play at warp speed on every single snap of every single game. We've heard Ryan Day talk. The other part you mentioned that, or touched on, Berms, like, we've heard Ryan Day say it can be a weapon for us. We can go up tempo on some drive and change gears and use different speeds. Like, I just don't think that they did that enough. I don't think they have to have 100 snaps a game, and that's not good for anyone. But they probably need to be more willing to change gears than they were a year ago.
I agree, and I'm a believer that you shouldn't do your opponents a favor, and that's what Ohio State does when it slows things down, especially considering that they have a trigger man in Julian Sayin who is built for a hurry up offense. That is what he is best at. It is a 3-step drop and throw. That is what Julian does. That's why you have a quarterback who is that accurate and who is that precise with the football. I don't think Ohio State did itself favors, and I think it was actually hurting itself by not doing that more often last year. But the point that I think here is that Ohio State overreacted to the idea that their defense didn't have a lot of depth last year, a lot of guys ready to go. And so they were like, let's not put them in a position, because you weren't really doing a lot of rotating on defense. And so it made sense to keep your defense fresh. And we saw the results of that. When it came down to the talent equated games, you have to find your advantages. And the advantage for Ohio State is getting the ball quickly to Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, Bo Jackson, Max Clare, et cetera. And to not do it in the games when it mattered the most did not make sense to me, because, again, any advantage you can get in those games is going to be magnified. So I agree that it was intentionally muted through the majority of the season, but I don't think that was a problem. I think it was only a problem in the games they lost because it was clearly a way they had an advantage, because the other games they have an advantage just by showing up. And in the games when it's talent equated, you have to find a way to play to your strengths and to keep your opponent on their back foot and on their heels. And when Indiana and Miami, two teams that did not have much depth, were being given an opportunity to catch their breath, it just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right. The final love letter in To the Beat presented by the Waterworks came from Nick. I loved it. I don't think it's practical. I'll say that before I read it, but I was fascinated by the concept. This is out there. A smart way to preface it from Nick. But has anyone given Eddie George a call over at Bowling Green to see if Ohio State could pay them to be the Buckeyes farm school? We pay for Bowling Green to have better coaches. We help the freshmen find NIL deals they develop elsewhere for 2 years, then come be Buckeyes. Just saying. He also mentioned, well, that could be, players at Miami, players at Ohio. I think it's more possible than I originally thought that you could help facilitate NIL deals with a long-term view on transferring in, rather than supplementing another state school's coaching staff. That's probably a non-starter. But I do like this idea of farming out to MAC schools and helping, like, state of Ohio NIL deals. That's might be the next level there.
It's not a terrible idea. I mean, we've seen Ohio State for the last decade plus have every school in the state at their recruiting camps, and those guys know they come there to find players of their own. The coaching staffs work together. I'll be honest, when I was a younger man, when I was a wee baby, And I learned of like places like IUPUI. I was like, oh, that's just a school that Indiana and Purdue get to choose their stuff from. Like, that's pretty cool. So BGOSU doesn't sound terrible to me. So I think it's possible. I do think that the better relationships you have with these coaching staffs around the state, the better. I think that's why Ryan Day goes out of his way to be respectful when they play against these schools. And, you're not going to see Ohio State trying to beat Kent State 90-0 or whatever. Obviously, Kent State's not getting a lot of good players, so maybe they could be on the list too. But yeah, I mean, the relationship.
I don't know. You can't spread them around to every team in the state.
I don't think that we're all that far away from the group of 4 schools or the group of 5 schools.
Group of 6 now, Birm.
Group of 6 schools becoming like feeder programs. I don't think that we're that far away from that. I think that there is like we just saw, what was the team that just moved up into FBS?
North Dakota State.
Like, that's stupid. I think way more teams should be taking a step down and finding ways to win championships. Why would you want to be the 137th best team in FBS when you could be the top school in FCS? Like, I don't know. I think we know that the sport is eventually going to segment between the big 64 and the bottom 64. So I think that there are these sorts of discussions probably down the road, but I don't know that it's going to happen now. Everyone wants to win.
Plus, North Dakota State has the incredible disadvantage of having to go join a conference that already has Wyoming in it. So, like, what are you going to do? Like, you're overmatched from the start. Hope you found a perfect match this weekend for your Valentine. And if not, hang in there and just keep spending time with us right here on the beat.
St. Patrick's Day is coming up. It might be easier to find someone that's a perfect match then, based on the copious amounts of personal.
Looks like I'm ready for it with the green on already. Didn't even think about that. Anyway,
are you going golfing today? Like, why are you wearing a golf stuff? Are you hitting the links?
There's still a ton of snow on the ground. I can't do that.
Yeah.
I wish that I could. But wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and even if you don't have a Valentine, just say something kind to a stranger this weekend if you see them, and say, hey.
Not too kind, because strangers don't particularly like to be told nice things by people they don't know.
You can just say, I hope you have a great day. Or hope you have a Valentine. You're a wonderful person.
For a while, I tried to deploy this method whenever someone, like, I'd leave a grocery store or something and someone, have a great day. Our approach, my wife and I, we would say, you have a better one. Oh, you should have seen the responses from people when that was said. They were just overwhelmed with joy.
So bring some joy to anyone you meet out there. And thank you to everyone who has been listening, watching, or writing in to the Austin and Birm Show at gmail.com. We hope you have the best Valentine's Day ever. We'll be back on Monday with some fresh new editions of The Beat, and hopefully a press conference with literally anyone at Ohio State. We'll take anyone. Honestly, the standards are low here. We just want to talk ball with the Buckeyes because that is our love language. He's Birm. I'm Austin. Have a great weekend.